All right, Mr. Chair, we're live on the air.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Villalobos. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the September 1st hearing of the Santa Barbara County Planning Commission. Would you please join me in the flag salute? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, Mr. Villalobos, could you proceed with items 2 and 3, please?
Thank you. Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning to the Commission. Planning Commission hearings are televised live on County of Santa Barbara Television, CSB TV, Channel 20, at 9 a.m. in the South Coast, Lompoc, San Ynez Valley, Samaria, and Orca areas. Rebroadcast of Planning Commission hearings are on Fridays after 5 p.m. on CSB TV, Channel 20. Today's hearing will also be streamed live on the county's website and will be available for download in a day or two. Moving on to the roll call, Commissioner Cooney.
Here.
Commissioner Bridley.
Here.
Commissioner Park.
Here.
Commissioner Blau.
Here.
And Chair Farini.
Here.
Thank you.
So, Commissioner Park, do we have a new puppy?
We have 10 new puppies.
10 new puppies. Congratulations.
This is Pierre.
Pierre, I like
Yeah.
it.
Wow.
We need a close up. Poor Pierre's. Look at
There you go.
Oh my goodness. When did they arrive, Commissioner Park?
They started at 12:05, 5 minutes after midnight, and they finished at 4 this morning.
Oh my God, that is, what kind of puppy is that?
Great Pyrenees.
But I don't oh my God, he's adorable.
He'll be bigger than you in about a year.
I
So now-
can't wait to meet one.
And so now is this Corleone's offspring or which parent?
Corleone's sister, Ravenna. And then Porthos. You met Porthos. He toured Isla Vista with you. And
Yeah.
that's the daddy.
I love it. Pierre. Okay.
Now, John, isn't that unusual to have 10 live puppies?
Yes, especially when at the ultrasound they said we would have 5 puppies. Then when we did the x-ray, they said, no, we would have 8 puppies. And then they kept coming out.
All right, let's get
Okay,
to
I'm sorry. We could spend too long doing this. I know, adorable.
Mr. Wilson. Can you proceed with items 4 and 5, please?
Good morning, Chair and Commissioners. Regarding the status of our agenda, we have one item that was continued from a prior hearing. Staff is ready to present on that today. And I can move on to the the projection report, if that's okay, Chair.
Yes, sir.
I'm looking at our projection report for the upcoming hearings. Our next hearing is scheduled for next week, September 8th. However, we have no items projected for that date, and I believe Commissioner Blau will be absent. My recommendation is that we cancel that hearing. The next hearing after that is September 29th, and that's when we projected the Exxon Mobil in trucking project to be heard. And as we talked about last hearing, we have scheduled 2 dates for that. The first date is September 29th. We've also set a special hearing for that Friday, October 1st, in case it's needed for Planning Commission follow-up and questions to staff to direct them for either further information or direction on that. So that would be when we return September 29th and then October 1st. Following that, we have a hearing on October 6th. We have the continuance of the appeal of the Orca gas station. And then we have several other projects on that date. There's an appeal on that date of an ADU and then some other projects listed as well as an appeal of an exterior alterations on a property in Summerlin area. And then a conditional use permit for a solar project, I believe. And then moving on to October 13th, we have the Halama Beach park improvements scheduled for that date, as well as a appeal of a cannabis cultivation permit on that date as well. And moving further down the projection report, October 27th, we have one item, which is recorded map modification. And then November 3rd, we have one item on that date, which is a development plan, CDP, for a SoCal Gas line 1004. And then nothing on November 10th. And then November 17th, housing bill implementation by long range planning on that date. And then December 1st, we have a follow-up as well on that one. So that concludes the projection report. And then I will leave it to Director Plowman as far as a discussion, as far as when we may return to in-person hearings and during the director's report. As of right now, we are anticipating not returning to in-person hearings until the executive order expires, which is at the end of end of September. So it's looking at like we will probably go maybe in person in October. So we will coordinate with you on that special hearing, which is October 1st, because that actually could be the first time we're back in person, which is that Friday. And so we will coordinate with you as those hearings come up. So that concludes the projection report, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Wilson. Any commissioner questions?
No, but I'll go ahead and make a motion that we cancel the the September 8th hearing.
Okay. Can we get a second?
Second,
second.
Okay.
dual seconds.
Okay, Mr. Villalobos.
Commissioner Cooney,
Aye.
Commissioner Bridley,
Aye.
Commissioner Park,
Aye.
Commissioner Blau,
Aye.
Chair Farini.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
Okay, thank you. Now is the time for, this be item 6, would be time for public comment for anyone from the public wishing to speak on, not on today's agenda.
Mr. Chair, I believe that our speakers are all signed up for our standard agenda item, but if anyone wants to speak for items not on the agenda, raise your hand and I'll call on you. Mr. Chair, I'm not seeing anyone raise their hand.
Okay.
I'm sorry. We do actually have a hand.
Okay.
Still a hand. One moment. So our speaker is Maureen Claffey.
Hi, sorry, I've had to jump in on this meeting before my time starts. Is this regarding agenda item 1, Cresco, or are we on something else?
We're on public comment for items not on today's agenda.
Okay, I apologize. You can. I'll reserve my comments for later. I apologize.
Okay, thank you. And with that, then we will move on to item 7, Planning Commissioner's informational reports. And I think we went over that earlier when we saw the puppies, so we will move on then to item 8. We have the minutes of August 4th and August 11th for consideration by the commission.
Actually,
Commissioner Bridley.
yeah, I'm sorry. I just heard one comment on August 4th. I think there's a numerical repetition on the administrative agenda. There's 2 item 6s. But other than that, I didn't have anything qualitative in the text.
So is that a motion?
Yeah, that would be a motion to approve.
I'll second it.
Okay. And was that for both or for just the 4th?
Just the 4th.
Okay. Mr. Villalobos,
Commissioner Cooney,
Aye.
Commissioner Bridley,
Aye.
Commissioner Park,
Aye.
Commissioner Blau,
Aye.
Chair Farini.
aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
Okay, on to August 11th. Commissioner,
No, I already did my part. Okay, well, I'll move to approve those. I didn't have any corrections, so I'll move to approve those as well.
And I'll second that one as well.
okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair, I did have one little thing I wanted to ask the commission about on those minutes. So I'm not sure how important it is, but on the first page, I did have highlighted Commissioner Park's arrival time. Because I know he came in a little bit earlier than anticipated, but I didn't quite catch it. I think he had jumped in, and I'm not sure if Commissioner Park could provide some input on that. Because I know that he missed voting on the minutes, but he was there before the presentation I think, on the first item.
Okay.
And just so you know, you are correct. He missed some of the ministerial sign, but he was there for the entire hearing for the item we voted on. I remember that.
Okay.
Again, I'm not sure how important it is, but I just wanted to point that out.
Should we
Alright.
call it 9:15 or something, just so it's not XX in the minutes of record?
Unless Commissioner Park has,
Commissioner Park, do you have anything to add?
I'm not sure which, we're talking about August 11th, and I had a court appearance.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I probably came on the call at anywhere from 9:30 to 9:45.
okay.
Okay. Mr. Villalobos, should we just hold these minutes and then maybe review the record and then put the correct time in?
The thing about, with Zoom is, like, you don't pop up and I can't see who's in attendance unless you speak. And I think he didn't speak until he had been on for a while, I think, before he spoke for the first time.
I see. Okay.
So I think, we could do an approximation, I think would suffice.
Right. So I think I'll throw 9:30 out there. Can we all agree on 9:30?
Yes.
Okay,
That's
great.
good.
Would you like me to call the roll call, sir?
Yes, sir.
All right, great. Commissioner Cooney,
Here.
Commissioner Bridley,
Aye.
Commissioner Park,
Aye.
Commissioner Blau,
Aye.
Chair Farini,
Aye.
and assuming Commissioner Cooney meant to say aye instead of here.
Yeah, I thought we were rejoining the meeting.
Okay.
So I was just letting you know I was back.
Oh, thank you.
I vote aye on the motion. Thank you.
Great. Motion passes 5-0.
Okay, great. All right, and then on to item 9, the director's report. Director Plowman?
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. I feel like I haven't seen you all for quite some time.
It's true.
So happy to be back. So quick update on COVID. Our office does remain open, but as you all know, there's now a mask mandate in place due to the Delta variant. And yesterday, the Board of Supervisors took action to require vaccines of county employees or weekly testing as a way to try and arrest the spread of this variant. So the procedures for how that's going to play out are still to be determined, but they did take action on having the HR and the rest of the departments to work together to figure out how that's going to transpire. With respect to the Brown Act, so we have been continuing to work with our lobbyist, Cliff Berg, and meeting with various staff members to either state senators or assemblymen to talk about the extension of the ability to have our commissioners be teleconferenced in. And there are a couple of things in play right now, 2 different bills, one sponsored by Rivas, one sponsored by Atkins, or maybe it's Lee. I can't remember the sponsor of the other one, but one has to do with public access via teleconferencing as a permanent fixture in the Brown Act, and the other relates to emergencies. So that you would permanently have language in the Brown Act that said if there were an emergency and it were unsafe to gather, then a local agency could go ahead and do their hearings by teleconference. So those are in the works, and they're probably going to be acted on before the end of this session, which is coming up rapidly. I think it's mid-September. Whether or not we will get this component addressed about our commissioners or our decision makers remains to be seen, but it's possible that the governor will extend, if we're continuing to see, extend this emergency provision if we're continuing to see high case numbers and, maybe new variants coming about. Hopefully not, but it's hard, very unpredictable, very unpredictable. So I will keep you posted on that. So for now, we're going to remain remote, but as soon as I know new information, I'll let you know. I do want to let you know that Autumn Brands was at the board last week, and that appeal was withdrawn. So they are moving forward. The reason it was withdrawn is because there's been a group, and we've talked about this a little bit in the past, the coalition and the growers have been working together and with county staff on developing something similar to what was developed in Cuyama in terms of guidelines. But we also did a lot of work, and I have to extend my expression of gratitude and kudos to our team, Joe Dargle and Travis Seawards and Catherine Lair and Jeff Wilson. We all worked with the growers on what they call a model odor abatement plan for Carpinteria, and also a set of voluntary guidelines that are not enforceable by the county. So this model OAP it added components to the OAP that we would typically see, but not something beyond what the county can enforce. So we worked very closely to get that done. And then the things that cannot be enforced by the county that these two groups wanted to see happen in their community are going to become part of their guidelines. And those guidelines can be mentioned and cited in our OAP, but it'll be noted that the county does not have any enforcement authority over those provisions. So that's exactly what we did with the Cuyama guidelines. We said we will cite them in your permit, but we will make it very clear that the county does not enforce them. And that's what resulted in, or the result of that was the withdrawal of the Autumn Brand appeal by the coalition. So we will see how that kind of compromise plays out in the Carpinteria Valley. And we're hopeful that it'll help community members and the growers that are still seeking permits there to come to some kind of resolution. I did want to let you know also that the board yesterday heard, we had a hearing scheduled for Canarios, which is in the Santa Maria Valley. And the applicant actually requested an extension to October 19th. And so that continuance was approved by the board. So we'll be going back on October 19th. The other upcoming items at the board are, we will be taking the extension of those COVID urgency ordinance amendments that we made and that you've already seen to the board on the September 14th. And then we will also be going back to the board about whether or not they want to pursue amendments to the cannabis ordinance on the 14th of September, as well as other potential amendments that the new Planner 3 that they gave us during the budget hearings would work on this fiscal year. We will be going back to the board with the Santa Rita Hughes appeal on the 21st of September. And that, so we don't have any other appeals scheduled yet at the board, but we do have them in the queue, and that is Central Coast Ag, G&K Farms, and there might be one other. Jeff, do you know? I think there is one more. Actually, I think there is one other, and I will tell you here. Hold on. A New Era. That was appealed to the board. And so we're working on a date for that. And then one other thing is we will be going, the Decker appeal we're going to be continuing that. We had originally planned to go back on the 5th of October, but we had to extend that a little bit to work out a couple of issues. And then Key Site 3 will be at the board on October 12th. I am happy to answer any questions.
Any questions of Director Plowman? Commissioner Park? You're muted, Commissioner Park.
This is a request that I have, and it pertains to the Exxon hearing that's coming up on September 29. And a number of times I've brought up in workshops and then at times like this, the possibility of doing different things we're doing now because of the pandemic and doing it well into the future. And obviously one thing is remote access via Zoom. And one thing I've asked about in particular, using Guadalupe as an example, because Guadalupe is in my district and has a lot of Spanish speakers and people that have appeared before on oil matters, Cat Canyon, and want to appear on Exxon. And the proposal is that we could have a early remote session, wouldn't need the whole commission, just someone to take testimony in the evening, video it, and present that at the main planning commission hearing. One thing I like about that is sometimes our translation has been really snappy and workable. I think it was the last time we did it. Other times it's been sort of cumbersome and took too much time. And so if one had a remote evening hearing, say on a Monday evening in Guadalupe, so people who have to work during the day and can't even join a Zoom call could say what they have to say, that could be translated and then played as a video at our Wednesday hearing. And of course, folks, if you're seeing a Zoom conference call, presentation or video, you can't really tell the difference. That would be my request. Can we do that? I could probably do it unofficially by just showing up and reporting it as ex-parte contacts and say, here, look here, here's a video of my ex-parte contacts. But I'd rather do it officially.
Yeah, Commissioner Park, through the chair, I think I really need to look into that. That is something we don't really have the resources for to do at this point in time. But I understand what your objective is, and that is to expand the public access. I can talk to you offline about another way we might be able to get them to be able to share their thoughts and concerns. But I'm just not sure how we would be able to provide for that right now, given where we are with our staffing and our hearing support staff. So
I was going to say maybe one thing might be interesting to do it on a very experimental basis. And I could literally just video something at any location in Guadalupe that would have us and then bring it to the hearing. We could just try it. And that way we wouldn't have to set up a lot of staff people and things that it's going to be expensive and might have some regulatory hassles. We just might see if it works in some manner. We might say, no, such a bad idea, we never want to think of it again. Or we might say, oh, this is kind of interesting. It took us 10 minutes and let's see if it's something that's worth pursuing in more official channels.
So I think what I would like to do is do a little bit of research internally and coordinate with the commission at their next meeting, or I can speak with you offline, John, Commissioner Park. But let me do a little bit of internal research on that before we charge ahead, so I can make sure we have all of our bases covered, and that we're not running into unforeseen issues legally or in any other way. So I will commit to looking into that, and then I will circle back with you, Commissioner Park, and we can talk about how that might be something that could be implemented on an experimental basis.
And I would sure appreciate that. And keep in mind, I don't think we'll be having another meeting until the 29th when we do Exxon, if I heard the projection report right.
Oh, is that correct? Secretary Wilson?
That is correct.
Okay. Okay, I will not be able to bring it back to the commission as a whole, but we can certainly let the commissioners know what comes of the research that I do via email.
That'd be great. I really appreciate it. Thanks.
Okay, Commissioner Bradley, and you're muted.
Just really quickly, I was writing down some notes. On September 21st, Director Plowman, you said what was coming up at the board?
It is the Santa Rita. It's the very small grow, 2.5 acres that was approved by the commission.
Okay, that's the appeal. Okay, that was my only question. Thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Blah?
Yeah, my only comment was on Commissioner Park wanting to do a night hearing. I'm not in favor of ever doing that again. We did it once, I think, in San Ynez, and it was a disaster. But I admire the idea that he would want to do a Zoom meeting, and I would encourage him to bring it back as an ex parte discussion, only because if there's something that the public brought up that's not brought up in the course of the normal meeting, he could inform us of that, and that'd be very helpful. But just want you to know, this commissioner is not in favor of ever doing a nighttime meeting. I don't care if it's Zoom or in person. Just let you know.
Yeah, I hear you. I think that's why I'm suggesting some kind of collecting video testimony and then presenting it at the, Wednesday morning hearing instead of dragging everybody into a meeting room for the evening. I understand your point.
And I'd really prefer you just come and tell us what the consensus was, or if they, tell us what the feeling was of the public, or more importantly, the reason for ex parte communications is if there's some piece of information that you as a commissioner obtain that the rest of us don't have, that's what we want to know about.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like listen to the public testimony, and it's kind of like, like with cannabis. If everybody's telling you that marijuana stinks, we get that. We don't need to have, an hour of testimony on TV that tell us that there's an odor problem. But if there is something that they provide their testimony that is something we don't know about, some unique piece of information, then that's important that we discuss it. That's all I wanted to say.
Okay,
Sure.
Commissioner Bradley? No. Commissioner Cooney?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know that Director Plowman will come up with all the relevant legal reasons why we can't accommodate Commissioner Park's concept. And I was just thinking about it in the meantime. It seems to me unworkable that we each of us would go off with a video camera, talk to people in our respective districts, and then try and bring it back to a single hearing and report on what everybody says. So I'm pretty sure it's not going to be workable. There may be some other way to capture the ability of people who can't make our regular meetings, but we've looked at this all the time that I've been on the commission, and we've never come up with an alternative other than holding a meeting at a different time when all commissioners or a quorum of commissioners is present.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Cooney. Director Plowman?
I don't think I have anything to add, Mr. Chair. I think Commissioner Cooney raises some important issues that we need to be thinking about. And I mean, I support as much public input as we can get within the bounds of how we can achieve that. So I'm always interested to hear ideas, and I will explore them, and then I will provide the feedback.
Okay, thank you, Director Plowman. Okay, let's move on to item 10, our standard agenda. Mr. Villalobos, could you read item 1 in, please?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. The following is a hearing on the request of Cresco, California to consider case numbers 20 RVP 58, 21 CUP 6, and 18 CDH 31.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Villalobos. Ms. Baylor?
Good morning, Chair Farini.
And correct me, sometimes I say your name wrong. Did I say it wrong today?
Baylor, that's perfect. Yep.
Oh, okay, all right, okay.
Okay, I shall get started once we have the presentation. Great. Thank you so much.
Oh, Ms. Baylor, I think Mr. Pettit is going to remind me that I jumped ahead here. Mr. Pettit?
Good morning, Chair. Just a reminder to update ex parte disclosures before you get to applicant or public comment.
Very good. Why don't we go back and do that? Fellow commissioners, do you have any ex parte to report? Commissioner Bradley? You're muted.
I'm not exactly sure. I actually talked to Aaron Weber about the Carpinteria model OAP, not specifically related to this case, but tangentially. And then I also spoke to representatives of the Cresco applicants last week, just briefly, and if I was going to attend the site visit offered by the neighbor to the property, which I did not. So that was it.
Thank you, Commissioner Bradley. Commissioner Park?
Yes, I had an email exchange with the appellant about walking the creek, and that never materialized, mainly because I was headed for trial in September on a case and had to resolve it. And then these puppies, but it did cause me to reread a lot of creek materials, and I appreciate that. And then I also had a phone conference with Nathan Eady for the applicant. That's what I recall.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner Park. Okay, Ms. Baylor, we're back to you now.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the Commission. Gwen Baylor here, and today I have a short presentation summarizing the updated odor abatement plan for the Cresco, California cannabis project. Next slide, please. As described in the staff memorandum, staff reviewed the updated OAP dated August 10th and found it to be consistent with the Article 2 Coastal Zoning Ordinance. The updated OAP states that a regenerative carbon scrubber system will be installed inside the greenhouse and greenhouse addition. The applicant will reduce or eliminate the use of vapor phase systems to the maximum extent feasible, based on the ability to prevent odors from reaching residentially zoned receptors. If off-site odor observations occur, the applicant will reactivate the vapor phase system temporarily while improvements to the regenerative carbon scrubber system are completed. Should the regenerative carbon scrubbers effectively reduce odor, the applicant will decommission the vapor phase system. If off-site odor observations occur and no further improvements are viable, the applicant will test the regenerative carbon scrubber system and vapor phase in combination. If off-site odor observations occur with the use of the regenerative carbon scrubber system and vapor phase in combination, the applicant will conduct a new best available control technology analysis to examine alternative technologies. Next slide, please. This is an image from the OAP showing the proposed configuration of the scrubbers in the greenhouse and greenhouse addition. The processing building will be outfitted with carbon scrubbers in addition to comprehensive HVAC technologies and seals on the building. Next slide, please. Staff recommends that you make the required findings for approval as revised in Attachment C of the staff memorandum. Determine that the PEIR is adequate and no additional environmental review is needed, and grant approval of the project subject to the conditions as revised in Attachment D to the staff memorandum. This concludes staff's presentation. Staff and the applicant are available to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Baylor. I don't see any questions of the commissioners, so we can move on to the applicant.
Good morning. My name is Sabrina Noah. Are we ready?
Yes, Ms. Noah.
Perfect. Good morning, Chair, Planning Commissioners. Sabrina Noah on behalf of the applicant, Cresco, California. With me today, I have our agent, Nathan Eady, Vice President of SCS Engineers, and David Gacom, Regional President of Cresco, California, who stands for our business. Given the feedback from the Planning Commission last time on August 11th, we have not prepared an additional presentation and added new information. However, we are available with Nathan to address technical questions, and Mr. Gacom will present concluding comments. Thank you so much for the opportunity to represent this project, and on behalf of our team and our staff, we're greatly appreciative of the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Noah.
Thanks, Sabrina. This is Nathan Eady with SCS Engineers. As Ms. Noah stated, we don't have a new presentation to give. We do have all of the slides from the prior hearing available, should any of the commissioners want us to refer back to those for clarification. So I just want to take a moment to address a couple of new technical items I saw when I reviewed the latest public comment letters received for this hearing today. So just briefly related to odor control, I did see some constructive commentary from Ms. Daly-Cossard's letter about odor control components. And I'm happy to go over those real quick. So there was a request that the greenhouse as part of the proposed project be covered with a material that cannot be permeated with odor. That's actually a great point, and it's lost as a small detail in the context of a lot of these larger issues. But the scope does include taking the flexible plastic material that's traditionally been on the greenhouse, greenhouse 1 up until now, and replacing it with a material commonly known as Dynaglass. It's a rigid polycarbonate material that is both far less wasteful. The flexible plastic in Carpinteria's weather tends to only have a lifespan of about 2 to 3 years. The Dynaglass should last order of magnitudes like 20 to 30 years. And it's also a more sealed, consistent product that should help reduce overall odors at the greenhouse. So that's already proposed as part of the project and is essentially just waiting for approval of this permit to be retrofitted onto the existing greenhouse 1 and would also be on the new nursery greenhouse extension that's proposed. The public comment letter also asked confirmation that the odor systems, the scrubbers inside the greenhouses, be run at night. So yes, I can confirm that as of right now, all odor systems in Carpinteria, such as the buyers, are generally run 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The scrubbers that we're proposing inside the greenhouses will definitely run at night. That's actually when they do their most effective work. At night, greenhouses have their blackout curtains drawn and their roof vents closed completely or close to completely. So the air exchange rate goes down and the odor concentration tends to build up. So it's actually one of the best things that these scrubbers do, is it helps control and reduce that overnight concentration and buildup of odor, so that when the system opens up in the morning through the vents and the blackout curtains, there's far less odor to be released. There was also a request that there be ongoing monitoring of the effectiveness of the odor systems and that the county dispatch inspectors to follow up on odor complaints, and that additional carbon scrubbing technology or equivalent be deployed if it's needed in the future. So our odor plan that's presented to the commission today in section 1.6.5 already has the adaptive management strategy. So if for whatever reason, regardless of what odor system is functioning on the project site, if there are still verified odor complaints occurring, there's an obligation by Cresco to engage third-party engineers to go back, audit the facility, confirm whether or not odors are still occurring, and if they are, take steps to control it up to and including a complete replacement with whatever is the latest backed odor control technology at the time. So if today we believe that's Infinity Scrubbers, but 5 years from now it's something different, if there is ever an ongoing odor problem, there's an obligation by this applicant to take actions to upgrade to newer technologies if it's necessary. And then the last thing in a public comment letter received from Ms. Carrillo, she requests, whether or not we can divert 100% of the project's traffic to Via Real. So in case that was unclear in the previous hearing, or the commissioners need a reminder. So we work diligently with the fire department to open up the secondary access route from Via Real. Unfortunately, that access route is not wide enough to safely accommodate large delivery trucks. So all of the employee traffic of passenger vehicles and passenger trucks will be diverted to Via Real. That's over 90% of the project's traffic. Large deliveries of commercial materials must still go through Foothill, as well as emergency access for fire trucks. But that much reduced traffic is both lower than what is occurring on Foothill today as part of the non-conforming cannabis operation, and is lower than the historic cut flower operation that preceded it. So we've gone as far as we practically can at this point of reducing traffic on Foothill, but unfortunately we cannot have 100% of the traffic go on that route because it can't accommodate those larger vehicles. That's all I have for now, unless Commissioner Blau has a question.
Not really a question, but a comment. I'm happy to see you do the scrubbers at the evening as opposed to during the day. Although, just as information, I'm pretty familiar with PG&E power rates since I've been involved with a number of big solar projects. You're crazy not to run them. If you run them during the day, it's like 57 cents a kilowatt. You run them at night, it's like 15 cents a kilowatt because of the A6 and A10 rate. So the public can be rest assured that that's the way you're going to do it. Because like I say, it would be 4 or 5 times as expensive on your PG&E bill if you did it the opposite way. But that's glad to see you do that anyway. But just so they know.
Okay. Secretary Wilson.
Chair, Freeney, and Commissioners, I just wanted to bring something up before the commission before we go too much further. There is a letter that was submitted late, and I think the applicant just referenced it. So if the commission or anybody wants to ask questions about that letter, I recommend that we take an action either to vote in the record or not before we have further dialogue or discussions about it. And I'll refer to Mr. Villalobos for that exact letter and back to the chair for action on it.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Mr. Villalobos, can you reference it?
Sure, Mr. Chair. When I submitted it emailed it to the Planning Commission, I did make note of it. It's the letter from Ms. Cassart Daly. And I want to make sure that we mentioned this before, at least before public comment. So in case, depending on what action the commission takes, she can maybe modify her public comment, because I know that she is in attendance in today's meeting. So it's the letter dated August 30th. It just came in past your noon deadline on Monday.
Okay. Does anybody want to take action? Everybody's hands up, but does anybody want to take action on accepting that letter? Commissioner Park.
I normally don't like to accept late materials. For one thing, I never have time to read them, and I also don't want to encourage people to do it. On the other hand, I think this letter raises some issues that I want to touch on about the creek. And just so that my comments make more sense based on what records there, I think I would like to move this into the record, even though that's unusual for me. So I will do that. Move that we accept it late.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Park. Commissioner Bradley, you're muted.
I'm sorry, I'll just second Commissioner Park's motion to accept it into the record.
Okay, I'm gonna let the commission know I have not read that letter, and I'm gonna have to vote no because I haven't read it. Just wanted to explain my vote before we get to that. Commissioner Blau?
Yeah, I agree. I have not read the letter either, although I'm glad to see that she's in attendance and given an opportunity to make public comment so she can raise the issue of public comment, and Commissioner Park can then weigh in further comments if he wants. But I think in the 13 years I've been on the commission, or however long it's been, there's maybe only been one other occasion where I've allowed a late letter to come in, and usually those are the ones where they tend to be older people that have very large type and double space. And if they were to do a standard 10-point spacing, it would fit on one page. So I will be voting no as well.
Okay. Commissioner Park, did you have something you wanted to add?
Well, I had some questions for Mr. Edie, or is that not what we're talking about right now?
Well, we're kind of a little bit of both. So,
Oh, that's right. We're talking about the motion to.
I have a
Yeah.
motion second to accept the letter. So I'm gonna have Mr. Villalobos do roll call on that, and then Commissioner Park will come back to you for your questions of Mr. Edie. Mr. Villalobos?
Commissioner Cooney,
Aye.
Commissioner Bradley,
Aye.
Commissioner Park,
Aye.
Commissioner Blau,
No.
and Chair Farini.
No.
Motion fails by a vote of 3-2. And
I think it,
no,
You
that's
need a
correct.
Majority 4-1.
It requires a 4-1 vote.
okay.
Okay. All right. Now, Commissioner Park, on to your questions of Mr. Edie.
Yeah, I have some questions about something that isn't in your presentation. And you're probably sitting there thinking, oh my God, he's going to quiz me about power supply requirements for scrubbers again. But I'm not. I want to ask you about creek restoration and what creek restoration Cresco has done. What were you asked to do? What did you think of doing but weren't allowed to do? And then what other creek restoration has occurred on Arroyo Paradon in the immediate vicinity? But you know, this might better be something that be addressed in Mr. Edie's rebuttal after other public comments. So, Mr. Edie, let me ask you: would you rather address my questions now or wait until your rebuttal? I'm happy either way.
Commissioner Park, through the chair, let me take a brief shot at it, and then if the commission wants to revisit it later as the rebuttal, we can also bring up some of the graphics that are involved depending on the level of detail. But the section of, let me start kind of offsite and third-party restoration and then work our way back. So to the best of my knowledge, when Caltrans replaced the Arroyo Paradon Bridge, which is just off the parcel along Foothill, they did some work inside the banks of Arroyo Paradon. So they went in, removed the old bridge, put in the new one, and then did some restoration of the creek bed itself at that time. And in fact, Caltrans is still carrying out some native plant revegetation on the shoulders of Foothill today, adjacent to the Arroyo Paradon corridor. So anybody who visits Foothill and pays close attention, you can see the oak trees and the temporary irrigation that they put in briefly or recently. And then as far as Cresco is concerned, so the project again proposes no disruption, no vegetation removal, et cetera, of Arroyo Paradon Creek or the core ESH area on its banks. So the southern bank of Arroyo Paradon Creek is on this project parcel. There's a whole line of native oak trees. All of those are being retained in place untouched. And for those that are familiar with either the project plans or the site, there's an existing paved access road that runs along the southern boundary of that core ESH area, and the project's existing security fence. Both of those remain in place. South of that, the project proposes to put in an expansion of the ESH buffer, so native revegetation, native oak trees, native shrubs, to act as an enhancement and expansion of the ESH area that exists there today. So basically make the riparian corridor bigger, better, wider, and of higher quality. Part of that is removing the avocado orchards and agriculture that has occurred there since, from our historic aerials, at least the 1930s. That's the project as it exists today. Previous iterations of the project, we actually proposed to put a stormwater basin up in that area. We felt that that was a reasonable dual use, that it could function as sort of a seasonal wetland to further encourage use of the riparian area. Had that proposal moved forward, there was also a complex adjustment to the fencing. So we were going to move the security and project fence to the south and put in wildlife friendly fencing along that access road so that we could further encourage wildlife to actually come in and use that stormwater basin. CDFW actually reviewed that and commented that it was a good idea and just had some advice for us on how to make sure that the basin was wildlife friendly. The unfortunate thing is that a basin of that nature could be defined as development under the coastal zone policy, and the coastal zone policies and commissions, coastal commission's previous actions tend to frown upon development in the ESH buffer in this instance, even if its intent was to actually enhance the overall quality of the biology. So we removed the basin and all those fencing proposals. We've accommodated that additional detention volume elsewhere on the property outside of the ESH buffer, but we've kept our proposal to put in the native plant restoration where the avocado trees once were. So that's the gist of it. And I'm more than happy to go into any further detail or bring the graphics back up if it's hard for the commission or any members of the public to picture what we're talking about.
A follow-up question that I don't think will need your graphics, but or you may not know, in a project we looked at, a housing project, the Polo Villas project, which has a creek going through it. I think it's a different creek. In that project, there will be creek restoration within the stream bed itself and removing exotic non-native vegetation, which I think is sort of a plague on these different Carpinteria creeks. Now, did any of the Caltrans work do that kind of thing on Arroyo Paradon? And is that anything that Cresco will be doing as part of this project? Actual stream bed restoration?
Commissioner Park, through the chair. So regarding Caltrans, I would just be speculating on whether or not they did any proactive invasive species removal. I mean, at a minimum, I would suspect, if you look at historic aerials, they did a lot of earthwork in the creek channel itself. So assuming invasive species were wiped out during that construction phase, they obviously didn't replant them. So I would say there's been a net benefit to the quality there. But how seriously Caltrans took, invasive species removal, that probably goes beyond the scope of what they were doing, which is just to build the bridge and then restore the area better than what they found it. We have no proposal to do work inside the creek right now. I think Cresco, as part of its community service programs, would be amenable to participating in something that not only would, enhance the quality of the creek further on their parcel, but, perhaps there could be a greater Arroyo Paradon group that could lead efforts like that. And I think, as Ms. Noah has stated before, Cresco actually gives its employees paid volunteer time to participate in support of, community activities like that. So I think that would be a cool kind of greater effort that I'm sure Cresco employees could participate in as just part of a community-wide improvement project.
I like that idea of a collaborative thing that goes beyond the scope of the project itself, because I've just noticed in all the field trips I've taken down there, often what we get, because we have legal non-conforming structures that were built decades and decades ago, we'll have some substantial improvements that, the project wants to use, but they happen to be within buffer zones. And, it seems to me that if there was a sort of a trade-off that said, hey, we're gonna clean up these creeks of non-native vegetation and make them what they're supposed to be, these really wonderful natural resources, and in exchange for that, we don't have to move every boiler and water tank and so forth that's within some buffer zone. I think that's just sort of a general grand vision. It probably has not much relation to how we approve or disapprove this particular project, but it's certainly a thought-provoking thing that I think was brought up by the appellant, and I know that the applicant has thought about these things as well. So that's my angle, and I appreciate you addressing this. Thank you.
Commissioner Park, through the chair, we are a member of the Santa Barbara Channel Keepers and have, as part of the 36 hours of paid volunteer time that our employees receive on an annual basis, conducted general cleanup of the area, removal of trash, and appreciate the direction to include some additional activities in our community outreach. Our full-time community liaison has done work on the Franklin Creek, but we will absolutely take that thoughtful note for future work.
Thank you.
Mr. Cooney.
Mr. Chair, I had questions for Mr. Eady beyond the scope of the creek issues, if those are appropriate now.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Eady, I see where we are in time right now. We've got a plan to install new technology. Perhaps it's even best available technology, but it's a little bit early to be able to tell exactly how effective it will be in that very large greenhouse that we all visited during our site visits. So my question is, here we are, September 1, and we're looking forward. Can you update the time frame that you anticipate for having an effective installation of the carbon scrubbers into the project?
Sure. Commissioner Cooney, through the chair. One brief tangential issue before I forget. I think Commissioner Park has made a couple references to an appellant, which we don't have as of yet. So we've got some very passionate members of the public that I'm sure will like to speak, but this project isn't before the Commission on Appeal. The development plan revision process brings it to the Commission rather than to the zoning administrator. But to get back to your question on the status of carbon scrubbers, so the Infinity scrubbers that we have proposed right now, so to touch on why we're favoring those versus some of the more conventional bulk carbon systems that have been brought up in public comment letters. We took those suggestions very seriously as well. We actually went through and looked at the letter that was provided by a vendor, I think that's based out of the Pacific Northwest area. If we use a more conventional system like that, it would take somewhere between 70 and 90,000 pounds of carbon to try and successfully treat a greenhouse of this size. And that carbon would have to be exchanged on a regular basis. So going that conventional route, could you get to a point where it provides odor control? It's possible, but does it come at the cost of more heavy truck traffic and other ancillary impacts? It would. So we like the more innovative technology. It uses 90% less carbon by weight. It has cleanable pre-filters, et cetera. So the amount of truck traffic or anything related to maintenance of those machines should be far less than some of these conventional systems we've seen in the past. Now, for this newer technology, as of right now, my most up-to-date understanding is the vendor out of Holland is going to be providing another shipment of units to be pilot tested in Carpinteria probably sometime in November. That is going to be helpful in us seeing if the system can perform better than the 81 to 87% odor removal efficacy that we've seen in those earlier pilot tests, and help us better define variables such as how many scrubbers per volume of greenhouse do you need? So some added factors like that. And then after that next round of testing, the manufacturer should have those commercially available starting sometime in hopefully say like the second quarter of 2022. Now, one thing that's important to note is, our project involves some pretty substantial construction. So those scrubbers will not be needed, say, in the existing portion of Greenhouse 1 until it has been reclad in the Dynaglass that I talked about that covers the outside of the greenhouse. There's several improvements that will be made to the inside. So what we're hopeful is those new scrubbers will be ready and available by the time the rest of the construction on this project is complete. So if all goes as well, by the first time Greenhouse 1 is filled with plants and is ready to start producing odor, those new technology scrubbers will be ready to commission at the same time. But on the off chance that they're not, that's why the condition language that we suggested was we get up to 12 months to put that system in, or as soon as it's commercially available. So it's not 12 months just so that we can try and stretch it out. It's basically making sure that if we make a commitment, we can fulfill it.
Mr. Eady, who makes the judgment as to whether the carbon system is commercially available? The term commercial seems susceptible to different interpretations depending on who's asked.
Chair and Commissioner Cooney, I mean, the most important commitment I think that we can focus on is the OAP ensures that the system, whatever it is, has to work. And if it's not, they have to go through a series of tests and bring forth the best available technology at the time. So if we need to bridge that somehow with some sort of additional technology to abate odors until the Infinity systems are ready, or should the Infinity systems upon further testing not work as well, then we'll have to come back and say this is the alternative technology. But we've openly acknowledged that what the public wants to see is internal carbon scrubbing, and we're moving forward with the best technology we know of right now as fast as we can.
But in reality, we're basically asked to approve this project now, not a year down the line when we see what the technology is. So the best assurance you can give us is we've got the buyer system in place. We're going to keep it in place. That's going to be the best we can do for some time ahead. But even though we feel good about the prospects for the future, we're all really asked to take a leap of faith with you to get to that final stage where the odors really could be abated more completely than they are at this time.
So Commissioner Cooney, through the chair, I would agree to that statement to the extent that we're anticipating when a third-party company is going to transition from a prototype to just an off-the-shelf type system. But I wouldn't say it's all that speculative. So we have completed multiple tests of that system. We've confirmed that it works. We've made the assumptions of its efficacy being at the lower end of what we've tested, and it still, through our modeling, appears to work good enough for this project site. So what we're really looking for in that next round of testing is to see if this company can actually make the system work even better and further curtail odors. And then in the meantime, we've also conducted a ton of site-specific testing to make sure that if the buyers is going to operate in the meantime, we've got scientific data that shows that it's working today. The main reason for moving for this particular project site from buyers and combination neutralizer to scrubbers isn't so much to provide better odor control, it's to provide odor control in a different way that the community has asked for.
Well, I think that that explanation of yours is in agreement with the presentation that you've made previously and today. But I also think it presents a dilemma to the commission to decide whether we're going to be content with what is available today and not count on what might happen in the 9th inning of this game, because we're only in the 7th inning at this point. Would you agree with me on that?
Commissioner Cooney, through the chair. Yeah, I mean, we're stretching to try and use the technology that we think both provides the odor control that everybody's looking for and minimizes all other tangential impacts. Less truck traffic for its supply, less energy, less noise. And we have credible reason to believe that it's going to be available and it's going to work on the timeline that's needed for this project. And so we'd rather stretch and try and go for that better technology than adopt something that's more antiquated, only to wish that we had upgraded it, or waited for the better technology.
Well, thank you for your candor as always, Mr. Eady. I do think we have a tough decision to make today about the future, but we have lots of evidence that supports the conclusion either way. Thank you.
Commissioner Bradley?
Thank you. I don't know where it is in the memo or in the OAP, but I think I am pretty sure that what I read was the concept was the new technology will be implemented, and within 6 months of the charcoal scrubbers in the greenhouses in operation, then you would actually remove the buyer's system. Is that correct, Mr. Eady?
Correct, Chair and Commissioner Bradley. So the project site today is already equipped with a buyer's system that in fact wraps around all of the existing greenhouses, irrespective of the fact that greenhouse 1 has never been used to date to grow cannabis and isn't being used right now. So it stands to reason that if we're going to bring out a new system and test it, let's not remove the system that's already been there and has worked for the last couple of years until we've tested the new system and we understand its performance. So the idea is bring in these new internal scrubbers, put them through a 6-month testing phase. As soon as they're operational, we can immediately temporarily cease use of the buyer system. So flip a switch, power it down, and let the scrubbers do the work on their own. It just makes sense to leave the buyer system there as a redundancy should we do some initial testing and realize the scrubbers need some improvement or some power changes, et cetera. You're not left with no odor system to cover the cannabis odors, because this is also a non-conforming grow. So you've got some cannabis there already. So there is a plan to be a transitional period, but the goal, as clearly stated in the OAP, is if we can get the scrubbers to work, you eventually permanently decommission and remove the neutralizer system.
So my question, and I didn't find it in your condition 1 project description or the memo. I think I found it in the OAP, but no, I didn't flag it. So I can't remember what page or what section it's on. I'm wondering if 6 months is too short, and what is the disadvantage of leaving it in place longer? I mean, we're talking about a new technology. You're talking about a 6-month test period. What happens if something happens that upsets the carpal? Well, why not have a backup? It's like having a generator. You're proposing to have generators on the site for backup energy sources too, right? So what is the disadvantage of leaving it in place? I would say for a couple of years. I mean, we're talking about new technology, and I'm just nervous about letting the old thing go.
Sure. So Commissioner Bradley in the chair, I think that's a great idea to consider. So the intent is the system remains in place for 6 months, beyond which we already have a scrubber system that's showing that it's working effectively. And the intent there is that one of the things that we're cautious about with these carbon systems and why we haven't even suggested them until now is that conventional carbon systems, the carbon over time gets its ability to mitigate odors gets saturated. The pore space actually gets clogged with material and moisture, and you start to see the efficacy of the system fall off. It's another thing that we like about this newer technology is they've specifically tried to solve that problem. So you're not constantly having to exchange that carbon out. But it's nice to be able to test that and make sure that over 6 months, we're not seeing that degradation. So you can start to measure, am I seeing a fall off in the odor efficacy over time, and establish the schedule and the routine by which you need to clean filters, you need to exchange media, et cetera. I don't think Cresco would have any objections to leaving the buyer system. I mean, they've already purchased the equipment. It's out there today. So that's no additional cost to them just to leave it in place as a redundancy for longer. We're just trying to walk a fine line of, I mean, we've illustrated through site-specific testing and modeling. We think the scrubber system will work. We believe the buyer system is working today, but we've heard a lot of feedback from not just the commission, but the public that they would like to move beyond the buyer system. So we just don't want to say we're going to leave it there for 2 or 3 years and only aggravate those community members that we're trying to build a bridge to, that they feel like that's a Trojan horse to continue to use these systems for the next 3 to 5 years.
Okay, thank you. I guess I would be interested in the rest of the commission's view of that, because I really appreciate the fact that all the technology is moving so rapidly, and it's
capital that you spend on the scrubbers, you achieve a return on investment in probably 18 to 24 months. And so every month beyond that, you've actually substantially reduced your operating costs. So it's a win-win. You have the community getting a different form of odor control that they prefer. Over the long run, it's also cheaper for the operator.
And I think if I remember, if I heard correctly from several community members, they didn't like the chemicals that are in the buyer system that could possibly migrate out and cause somebody an unknown or an unforeseen problem. So with carbon filters, you're not putting any chemicals into the air of any kind, or any moisture or otherwise. You're just simply attaching the odor to the carbon particles and you clean them later on. Do I have all that correct?
Chair and Commissioner Blau, yeah, so that's correct. So we've listened to the community. I mean, we've taken all of their concerns about what's in EcoZorb and other neutralizers very seriously. We still contend that we've done testing, we've shown that that's safe, but knowing that the community still wants to move in this direction, scrubbing technology basically captures the odors inside the greenhouse. There's no need to off-gas any sort of vapor or anything like that. So if there's no other questions, I think Mr. Gakin from Cresco want to make a concluding statement, and then we're done, but still available anytime.
Thank you, Mr. Eady.
Wonderful. Thank you, Nathan. Commissioners, through the chair, I just wanted to thank you for having us back for the continuance. And I want you to know that we have deep gratitude for the process that we've gone through. We've learned a lot, and we hope that that is reflective in the application that we bring forward to you. And, you know, as we reflect back, we're all in on this from Cresco's perspective. We believe that our application has the best available control technology, and that the design of the facility is very, very thoughtful and puts the community forward in its best interests. So with that, thank you, and we'll turn it back to the chair.
Okay, thank you. Let's move on to public testimony. Mr. Villalobos.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have 5 speakers currently. Our first speaker will be Maureen Claffey.
Hello, my name is Maureen Claffey. Before my timing starts, I have a few points of order. Can I mention them really quick?
Yes.
Quick question. Were comments allowed? I raised my hand to make a comment on Ms. Plowman's report. Were public comments allowed on that? Ms. Plowman made a report.
So,
And I raised my hand in reference to that and wasn't acknowledged.
so, well, I don't see your hand raised then, and we did ask for public comment.
No,
so
you didn't. Actually, if you look back at the meeting, you didn't ask for public comments regarding Ms. Plowman's report. And I had some comments.
We do that. So anyway, what's next?
The other question I had was, I'm looking for any of the commissioners to divulge their ex parte discussions, specifically with Mark Titillo and carp growers, and also Mark Byers. Those are relevant to this discussion.
Duly noted. On with your public comment.
So just to be clear that no one has, none of the commissioners have spoken with Mark Titillo or carp growers or Mark Byers.
You may make your comment now, and then I will get back to the commissioners on public comment.
Okay. So just let me know when my time starts, because I want to try and pack it in.
Your time is starting now.
Okay, great. My name is Maureen Claffey. I'm the founder of Save Arroyo Paradon Watershed. A lot of the commissioners today had specific questions about Arroyo Paradon Creek. I wish that they had reached out and joined the tour that I offered all of them, and or contacted me anytime about the creek. I've gotten to know it very well. I've visited it since I was a child. I grew up next to this creek, and it's very, very dear to my heart. As I've said, there's 90 people who have joined the petition that I've offered in opposition to this project. I also want to make clear that as much as, Mr. Eady and Ms. Noah talked about their kind of environmental track record, no one reached out to me. No Cresco employee has ever reached out to me with any kind of concerns about the creek, the neighborhood, or anything. And I am the primary activist working on this project. So, my first point, I wrote a 4-page letter that I hope you read regarding kind of the updated odor plan and other issues. It's published today under the opinion section of the Santa Barbara Independent. So I've already gotten feedback on that. You're welcome to read that whole letter. If you didn't read it, that's fine. A simple fix for a lot of the things we would like Cresco to do. We have a should/shall in a lot of the things. Let's move that to will or must, right? Shall, should means it'd be nice if they did this. Will or must means they must do that. So that's a simple fix to some of the language that would make a big difference. We're also talking a lot about like better, best technology, best available. In terms of odor control, the county must decide what is the best available technology. The county must decide. We know that carbon scrubbers are the best. Why? Because if you do a simple Google search of greenhouses, cannabis, and odor control, carbon scrubbers come up. They're recommended by the industry itself. And Santa Cruz County, for instance, puts carbon scrubbers into their cannabis regulations. It's written into their regulations. So carbon scrubbers are the industry standard. Santa Barbara County is the only county anywhere that's even attempting to use this vapor phase nonsense. Vapor phase is like spraying Febreze into the air to try to cover up the smell 24/7. I'm breathing that in with my family 24/7. We don't know the long-term effects of that on us or the steelhead trout, the red-legged frogs, or the tidewater goby that are in the creek now. Cresco has done no creek restoration. They've done no consideration of the creek. They're going to have massive construction. A last point too that I want to make is that one thing they're failing to mention, why did Caltrans rebuild that bridge? Why did Caltrans rebuild that bridge? Because the bridge failed after the 1-9 debris flow. My house had a foot of mud in the front of it. So they're building this in a high-risk flood zone, not a flood zone, a high-risk flood zone. There will be more floods, and this project could potentially be underwater and every part of it washed down the creek. So this project and the creek are inextricably linked, and I really hope that the needs and the needs of the habitat are considered over and above the profits and greed of one simple corporation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Our next speaker will be Elise Cosar-Daly.
Good morning, Planning Commissioners. My name is Elise Cosart-Daly, and I'm an environmental, civil rights, and anti-discrimination lawyer. My office represents Maureen Claffey and Foley Family Farm with respect to this matter. As outlined in my August 2nd and August 30th comment letters to the Commission, the project as proposed does not comply with the coastal zoning ordinance, and therefore the Commission cannot approve a CDP or a CUP for the project. To remedy the issue, I'm here to request two things. One, that the Commission direct Cresco to conduct additional investigation into the potential impacts that the project might have on sensitive species in the creek, and order Cresco to prepare a habitat protection plan consistent with the coastal zoning ordinance requirements to ensure that the project does not in fact harm sensitive species or their habitat. The Commission I'm also here to request that the Commission require Cresco to install a carbon filtration rather than a carbon scrubbing system because this has been proven to be effective. We know it's the best available technology at this time, and it can be implemented immediately instead of waiting for something that's speculative. I really commend Mr. Eady and the applicant's move towards carbon filtration. Thank you. Thank you for your work on that. Thank you for doing some due diligence on that as well. Unfortunately, what they're asking you to do today is to take a leap of faith, which many of the commissioners have aptly pointed out, and to approve a system that has yet to be proven to be effective and is yet to be commercially available. We have something available now that is proposed and can be done. Cresco has made certain contentions that that system is not feasible. They've said that there will be noise impacts, but the fact of the matter is you can have soundproof blowers, which will reduce that issue. In fact, the carbon can be recycled. Nvent, which is the vendor that had the proposal for a carbon filtration system, in fact, regenerates the carbon. And while this may cause some additional traffic there, I think it's worth the risk to have the best available technology as required by the coastal zoning ordinance implemented in this project. The other issue with the system that Cresco proposes is that their own data indicates that there will be odors that reach residential areas with the use of the system. That's not the case for the carbon filtration system that's been proposed. The other issue is that, look, we all agree that Byers doesn't work as effectively as it should, and that it shouldn't be implemented here. If you don't comply with follow our recommendations, and you approve the carbon scrubbing system that the applicant has proposed, please prohibit the use of Byers. Prohibit the use of Byers, make sure that the system can go into effect without Byers. I really appreciate Mr. Eady's willingness to reduce the smells at night and his thoughtfulness around that. And I ask the county, if they're going to approve this system, please require that Cresco close all the vents at night and run the scrubbers all night so that it's a requirement of the permit. The enforcement system also really needs to be managed and actively enforced by the county, not by the applicant. We recommend that if there are 3 instances of detectable cannabis odor from the project in nearby residential areas, confirmed by a county inspector, that the commission require Cresco to install the carbon filtration system that we've proposed, or whatever the best available technology is at that time, which is not a vapor phase system. With respect to the creek, Cresco's claims that the project won't impact sensitive species just isn't supported by sufficient study or evidence. The avocado orchard has already been destroyed, and that was in the ESH buffer. It was not being actively managed, and therefore it likely served as habitat for birds and other species. but we don't know if it had any impacts on sensitive species because they didn't do the studies they were supposed to make sure that there weren't any nesting birds there. So unfortunately, we don't have that data, and the project may have already had an impact. They also just didn't apply the Santa Barbara South Coast Wetlands HGM model, and they contend that it's not necessary in this case. But what the model does is it basically assesses how a stream and the surrounding area is currently functioning, and then it projects how the development's going to impact that. 9 of the 28 variables in this model have to do with portions of the habitat that exist outside the stream bed itself. So even if they're not doing any work in the stream bed, their activity around it can make an impact. It's really important that we're extra careful here because this stream serves as habitat for tidewater goby, for steelhead, for red-legged frog, all endangered species, and for sensitive coastal live oak. There's evidence to show that the project will likely have impacts. There's the avocado orchard removal that's already occurred. There's the smell of the cannabis and the use of the buyer's system. And there's a likelihood that the detention basins will overflow into the creek more frequently than projected by the applicant. And that's going to take with it any kind of runoff, pollution from any of the hardscape on the project. So those are things that are really real and tangible potential impacts to the creek that is really important sensitive habitat. The last point I want to make is I just want to get into the record that the letter that I submitted came in, it was late, and I do apologize for that. I came in at 1:46 p.m. that's about almost 2 hours after the cutoff. It was CC'd to all the commissioners, and it didn't prejudice the other side because they were able to take a look at it. And so I would respectfully request that you accept that letter into the record. Thank you so much for the opportunity to comment. I truly appreciate it. And I'm happy to take any questions you have about the things that I've raised here.
Our next speaker will be Anna Carrillo.
All right, good morning, planning commissioners. Thank you for taking this opportunity that can take this opportunity to speak to you. The protection of the Arroyo Paradon Creek is of a paramount importance. There are at least 3 other cannabis projects abutting this creek. There should be a habitat protection plan required since cannabis activities could have adverse effects on the habitats or sensitive natural communities. Please make sure the possible adverse effects are not occurring. There should be a designated trail dedicated along this beautiful creek connecting to the proposed trail on the north side of Foothill Road, because it goes all the way to the ocean and could come off of Via Real also. I'm very pleased to see the willingness of Cresco to install the regenerative carbon scrubbers in their greenhouses. I'm happy to hear that they're phasing out the buyer's system. That's wonderful news for the community. I'm pleased to see that employee traffic will be using Via Real, but there needs to be a requirement that all other traffic except for emergency vehicles use Via Real. Also, thank you, Mr. Edie, for trying to address that. Foothill Road is very narrow with school buses, bicyclists using this road. I have followed many vehicles that aren't able to even stay in their lane. Since the traffic on Via Real will be increased from 25 employees to 75, there is a requirement in the Carpinteria agricultural overlay about paying into a road fund for increased usage. Haven't heard anything about that. Please insist that solar be added to the new processing building. I keep bringing this up and I've never heard any comment about why solar, because they're building a brand new building, why solar can't be included. In the listed conditions of approval for number 10, odor abatement implementation and monitoring, there is a requirement that during the first year of operation, there be quarterly inspections. For the one fully permitted operation here in Carpinteria, this still hasn't been completed because the source of the odor in the La Mirada EDRN can't be identified, nor has the renewal of the business license for the fully permitted operation been received. even now, with more permits being issued in this area, there still isn't any way to identify the source. The community was promised once permits were issued, odor complaints would be taken care of. And now the community is told that all the permits in the area have to be granted before the source can be identified. There is still no means to do this once everyone is permitted. In compiling a list of possible cannabis ordinance changes to be considered by the Board of Supervisors, there must be a means for first-generation operators to be able to upgrade their odor abatement systems to newer technology. The community now knows that using EcoSorb in the vapor phase systems can be detrimental to the health, welfare, and safety of the community. I previously shared at the August 11th Planning Commission meeting, there are 11 new cannabis operations that have already received their CDPs using the vapor phase technology. How can they go about upgrading their equipment to carbon scrubbers, the best available technology? Thank you very much.
Our next speaker will be Mark Chatillo, to be followed by Tara Stefan, who will be our last speaker.
Mr. Chair, this is Mark Chatillo. I'm just observing the proceedings. I didn't request to speak. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Stefan?
Hi there. I'm also just monitoring the hearing today. I do not have any public comment prepared, but thank you.
Okay, great. Mr. Chair, with that, that is the end of our public speakers.
Okay, thank you. Does staff have anything they'd like to add after public comment?
Chair Farini, yes, I would like to respond to some of the comments that were brought up during public comment.
Please.
So I would like to, okay, thank you. I would like to acknowledge that County Flood Control reviewed the project, and the project includes all flood control comments, as well, including an expansion of the existing detention basins to accommodate stormwater. No permits are required for avocado tree removal. The project included a biological resources assessment that was peer reviewed, which confirms that no impacts to ESH are anticipated. And the biological assessment states that a habitat protection plan is not needed. As analyzed in the biological assessment, there is an existing paved road and fence, which are located between the project site and Arroyo Paradon. The project includes new plant restoration in the ESH buffer area. And consistent with the program EIR and Article 2, the project includes a comprehensive wildlife movement plan and tree protection plan. So let me know if you have any additional questions based on the public comment.
Yeah, one thing that I heard was there was reference to road fees be assessed towards the project because of potential increased traffic. Could you discuss that a little, please?
Chair Farini, yes, absolutely. So the project is subject to countywide development impact mitigation fees, and with development of the new processing building, a new greenhouse addition, and other development related to the project, there will be fees required to be paid to the County Roads Department. And those fees are managed by county roads for road improvements and all of that kind of stuff.
And those fees are assessed through the building department, probably?
That's right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, through the building permit process.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. And then there was one other question that interests me, and that had to do with solar panels or the solar electric system associated with the new project. Are there any requirements or anything like that from the county?
Yeah, Chair Farini, so there are no requirements for solar panels on the development that's proposed. And Nathan may be able to speak more to this, whether or not they want to, include that in the project in the future. It's something that Nathan and I have talked about because this issue has been raised by public comment in the past by community members recently. But at this time, there are no requirements for solar panels, and that's not something that's included in the project.
So should they decide at a later date to add solar electric to the project, would that be under a separate permit, or would they come back and amend this permit?
Chair Farini, there would be a permit requirement on the building side for building permits.
Got it. Okay, thank you. Commissioner Blau.
Yeah, two things regarding the solar. Again, I've done quite a few big solar installations. If it makes sense, they'll do it. One good thing is the feds and the state did extend the tax credits. They were due to actually be lower this year as opposed to last year. They're not now, but it's not, solar doesn't work in every situation. It kind of depends on your usage, time of day, structure. I mean, I can see where it may be difficult to put the solar on the roof of a greenhouse because then you're blocking the sunlight, which is why you have a greenhouse. But I can assure you that these guys are smart enough to know that if it was cost effective, they'd do it. The only other comment I have on public comment was for Ms. Cosart Daly. I just want you to know that the reason that at least this commissioner wouldn't put it in the public record is that I didn't get it until late Monday to look at. And if you've ever seen the package that the county staff sends us to read on Friday for the projects that are going to be heard on the following Wednesday, you'd understand it. All of us every 2 years are required to go through an ethics training class that's put on by the state, lasts about 2 hours. And one of the big things that they want you to understand is that during this hearing process, we don't sit here and play with our telephones or do texting or read any documents. We're here to listen to the applicants and the public, give us public testimony. And that's why it's not a part of the public record. So it's not that we are not sympathetic to the work that you provided. It just, seriously, sometimes the volume of reading material is some 300 or 400 pages. And to get it, when it gets to us on a Friday afternoon, that's great. I got 4 days to get through it. But when it gets to us late on Monday, that doesn't happen that way. So again, it's just trying to follow the ethical guidelines that are propounded on us by the state. So you'll know. Those are my comments on the public testimony.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Wilson.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner, just a couple comments on I think it was the first public commenter in regards to public comment on the director's report. I recommend that after the conclusion of this item, we can reopen public comment for any comments on the director's report. But that would be after this item is completed. And then in regards to ex parte disclosures, I believe the commission already provided ex parte. And if any commissioners have any other relevant ex parte, then that would be up to the commissioners and chair to do that. That's my follow-up on that public comment. Thank you, Commissioner Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Commissioner Blau, did you have something to add?
Well, the only thing I was going to add is I think it was Maria. I don't know your last. I didn't get your last name, but she made well, like we could talk about it when we do the ex parte, but you did ask for ex parte, but it was only since the last hearing. At the first hearing, you asked for ex parte, and everybody talked about any discussions we had with them. So not to be confused that you only asked for ex parte since the last hearing we had.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Blau. Okay, does the applicant have anything they'd like to add after public comment?
Thanks, Chair Farini. Just two quick things. So to pontificate a little bit more on the solar issue. So solar definitely cannot be mounted over the top of the greenhouse. It needs to have that sun flowing through to get to the plants. Otherwise, we would need to use artificial lighting during the day as well. But the proposed processing building per California building code must be solar ready. So that's as far as California code goes today. So you need to have conduit, roof mounting design, et cetera, to make it so that photovoltaic panels can be easily installed on the building. Once it's taken that far, I mean, we haven't gone to that level of construction document design, but it's probably in Cresco's best interest to go ahead and put solar on the building. So we'll reevaluate that and make sure that we've made a decision one way or the other before we go back to SBAR for follow-up preliminary and final review. But at the discretionary permitting level, there's no requirement for solar. Building code makes the building be built to be solar ready. And then just on some of the other public comments, just out of curiosity, I pulled up our OAP. It uses the word shall 55 times. So I've been in planning a long time. County staff is very proficient at reading these documents and understanding the necessity for action words that can hold applicants accountable like shall, and it's replete throughout the odor plan. That's it. Thank you.
And Mr. Chair and Commissioners, Cresco has attempted to contact Ms. Claffey via email on January 16th. We did not receive a response. We additionally tried to engage verbally on July 11th, 2019. Both Mr. Aaron Ferguson, who was our current facility director at the time, and our full-time community liaison, Tara Steffen, offered to discuss the concerns. That interaction, unfortunately, was not successful or productive. However, we have had wonderful and productive community conversations with many neighbors, not only along Foothill, but also in the La Mirada EDRN. And you have seen the result of that community input on our design throughout our multiple presentations. So, we are very proud of the work our community outreach has done on this project. And thank you for the opportunity to address the commission. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Okay, so at this point, then if there's no further questions of the Planning Commission, we'll go ahead and close the public comment and then move on to Planning Commissioner's discussions. Commissioner Bradley.
Well, can we take a body break for just a few minutes?
Okay.
I don't want to mess up the momentum here, but it is 10 to 11. I might not be the only one.
All right. Shall we come back at 11?
I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, we're back on the air.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Villalobos. So we're at the point now with the Planning Commission, move on to discussion. No discussion. There's Commissioner Cooney. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to just make a couple of comments about the project and then hear from the balance of the commissioners. And then I'll be in a position to make a motion. The two outstanding issues here that concern me are whether we have done an adequate job of assessing the impact of Arroyo, of the project on Arroyo Paradon Creek. Ms. Claffey is passionate about this, but it is the fact that the neighborhood as a whole is concerned about the welfare of that creek and the other creeks in Carpinteria, and for that matter, creeks throughout the county. So I don't want to dismiss that issue lightly, but I think this commission is fully aware that in order to require additional efforts on behalf of this applicant beyond what has been proposed would really require some evidence that the project is going to impact the very valuable resources that the creek presents. For example, removing the invasive species in the creek and making sure that there is not damage to the creek by this project. With that respect, we have a lot of concern in our county and in our codes protecting creeks, and we have 100-foot setback around this creek. And I don't believe the applicant is required to go beyond the 100-foot setback. They have actually shown us that there is a further setback with a road that's adjacent to their fence. So I don't see the evidence here that would give us a basis to impose more restrictions than have been provided with regard to Arroyo Paradon. However, I want to note that the applicant has expressed a willingness to participate with others in the neighborhood and beyond in whatever improvement projects could be developed. I think they're ready, willing, and able to contribute manpower and perhaps even funding to give the creek the most healthy outcome it can possibly have. With regard to flooding, there is a condition of a retention pond that's going to help with future floods. I hope we don't have them. I empathize with Ms. Claffey getting really the short end of the stick with regard to overflow during the floods 2 years ago. I think many of us had similar experiences, and it's very concerning. But that's not the fault of this applicant, and I think the applicant is going to make the situation better, not worse. So while I certainly encourage them to move forward with their offer to get involved, I don't think we can require it as a condition, nor do I think it provides a basis for denial. The second issue is, of course, the odor abatement plan. As I said in questioning with Mr. Eady, it makes a lot of sense to us sitting here now that this is going to be a big improvement over the current odor abatement effort that's provided by the buyer system. But none of us will forget that we were sitting here analyzing the G&K project just 2 years ago or less, and we had only the buyer system to look at. And we were skeptical that pumping gas into the air was really going to sufficiently neutralize the impacts of the cannabis odors. And as history has shown, it's not the best solution in a relatively short time. But we have projects out there, as Ms. Carrillo pointed out, that have been approved on the basis of the buyer system. So we've moved along. We now have the prospect of a more effective system, but it's not here. It's not ready. We're not done yet. Now is the time for decision on this project. So our choice, my choice, at least as I see it as one commissioner, is to say, no, let's wait until you have the system installed and ready to go and proven. Then come back to us. And in the meantime, keep using the buyer system. At this point, I'm doubtful the buyer system is doing the job. We don't have a way of saying to any of the applicants that have been provided permits that they're the ones that are responsible for odors reaching residential areas. And it's vexing that we can't tell which are the violators and which are the compliers, or is it everybody sharing together to create the problem? And it's more doubt in this case, but in my view, what has been proposed and what will be followed, I'm sure, if staff is watching closely, is a process whereby we could end up with the system that not only works in this gigantic greenhouse being proposed, but throughout the Carpinteria Valley. And this applicant is going to bear the financial brunt of proving to us that there may be an effective alternative technology that allows us to decompress the buyer system. It may remain in place, but I hope it isn't used one day longer than necessary. There is a provision in the permit, as Mr. Eady pointed out, that the buyer system would still be attached to the buildings for a 6-month period after successful installation of the carbon scrubber system. So as I sit here today, I'm having trouble finding a basis to deny this project. We've had 2 good hearings. We've had continued input from the public. And if it were me voting alone, I would vote to approve the project as recommended by staff. But all the rest of my fellow commissioners have thought this through to the same extent, and I'm very interested in their views. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner King. I might add something briefly, is it seemed to me over at least the last year, possibly 2 years, we've been discussing carbon scrubbers and how to get them into project. And there was always some type of a roadblock because they didn't exactly know how they were going to work or how to make them work and were they going to be efficient. And this is really the first time I've seen an applicant try to thread that needle, if you will, to incorporate these in. They did do it last minute at the last meeting, and they're actually bearing more than their share of the burden, I would say, for their industry, especially in the Carpinteria community. And I think having a person like Nathan Eady with his knowledge and his integrity that helps this project in my eyes, that they are going to go beyond even the extra mile to see these scrubbers through. So I think it could be very exciting for the community. It's what everybody's been asking for. So you have my full support on the project, Commissioner Park. You're muted, John.
I agree with both points made by Commissioner Cooney, and I want to express the second point in a somewhat different way. And I'm stimulated to do that because he was putting it in baseball terms when he spoke about it before we left for our break, you know, the 7th inning and the 9th inning. And the way I see that is you've got the Bayer system and you're in the 5th or 6th or 7th inning and it's your starting pitcher and they're getting kind of tired, you know, and you think you're going to have to replace them sooner or later. But the way our system is set up, if you've got the tired starting pitcher and you want to replace them, you don't have the ability to just make a lineup change. What you have to do is go get a discretionary approval from the umpire, and then anybody in the stadium can appeal that determination by the umpire. And you say, God, I'm doing this to benefit all those fans in the stadium, but you know, every one of them gets to appeal if they want. And that's a crazy system. And that's the system we have right now. And so that means is, you know, if you're concerned about how long it will take to determine what's commercially feasible, and you have these doubts about the carbon scrubbers and when will it happen and all those things, which are all good points. Well, the alternative is just to do nothing and say, well, we'll just have the Bayer system. And that's a really a crazy system that motivates us to stick with the old stuff instead of the new stuff. So I think we just have to appreciate someone who's willing to say, we'll do the best thing we can in the future. That future is pretty soon. Okay, it's not the 18th inning, it's the 9th inning. And we will make that lineup change as soon as we figure out the best person to use for our relief pitcher there, which will be the carbon scrubbers in this case. So I think this is the right way to go about it. And it's sort of the right way to handle something given the kind of permitting that's necessary to make changes later with this technology. I like it that these people are trying to get us the best technology right now and give us a plan for going forward. One other thing I want to say about Cresco here that doesn't really so much bear on the approval of this project, but I learned something from every one of these projects, and I learned something about the big picture and what's best for the public. There's something here that Cresco's doing that should be noted, and that is their cannabis grow is going to be in a building that's not being utilized right now. And it's going to be in a building that's going to receive millions and millions of dollars of capital input to upgrade it. Okay. And it will not be the typical rickety wooden Carpinteria structure that we're attempting to reuse. It's going to be darn near a brand new greenhouse with metal framing and the Dynaglass and all this and that. And I think that's an interesting thing because that shows that Cresco is not just trying to make a quick buck on whatever crops it can grow while it has legal non-conforming status. They're going to put in a lot of money because they see this as a long-range effort. And that's significant in Carpinteria because, you know, we have the Ventura County, which is now legalized cannabis indoors in greenhouses, and Carpinteria, which has been the place to grow it, might not be the place to grow it. Ventura County might become that. And we're going to be sitting there looking at a bunch of approved grows that are in the rickety old wooden greenhouses that maybe aren't the best technology for going forward. They're going to need a lot of work. And that's going to leave a puzzling situation. But Cresco is willing to make that long-term effort, that long-term commitment with all the money they're going to be putting into fixing up the greenhouse where the main grow will be. So that's just worth commenting. Doesn't really bear on whether we approve this project or not. I join Commissioner Cooney in that I will support approval of the project. I made my comments earlier about what I see as a grand vision for taking the cannabis permitting process overall and somehow resulting in improvement in our Carpinteria creeks. But again, that doesn't bear on this particular project. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Park. Commissioner Braggley.
I concur actually with both Commissioner Cooney and Commissioner Park. And I just want to reiterate, cannabis is the craziest thing I have seen in land use planning, and I'm pushing now 37 years of doing this as a profession. It is so crazy because it's so complex in the land use challenges it presents. You know, a lot of people want to keep ag. I have articulated repeatedly to protect ag and not put hamstrings around it at every turn, even in the valley or in Sabata Canyon. And the Carpinteria Valley is like that too. A lot of folks remember before all the greenhouses were built, you know, there's some older families there and it has gotten very intense, but in fact, it has been characterized by fairly intense agriculture for half a century. And now we've got an applicant that's coming in to put deep, solid money in the best available technology, everything that a planning agency would want to encourage. And it's right here in front of us. The fact that we don't have it demonstrated right now at this time doesn't concern me, because if we waited until the very best solar panels were available from Tesla for putting on our roofs, we wouldn't have some of them out there on homes today. So I really appreciate the thoroughness of the applicant in this case and the community awareness. And I think their outreach has been exemplary. There's always going to be somebody who disagrees, but you sort of have to look at the big picture moving forward. And I certainly concur with Commissioner Cooney that I don't think anything regarding Arroyo Paradon Creek is evidentiary tied to this case. Same thing with traffic impacts or air quality impacts or anything else. This is actually going to be an improvement for how that site could operate now if somebody came in and wanted to grow garlic in those greenhouses, which would be very smelly and wouldn't have to go through all that we're making them grow now. So I think it's all very encouraging, and I just, I appreciate everyone's understanding that how quickly this has evolved. Really, I mean, oh my gosh, I think this is my second year anniversary on your commission, and to see how much things have changed since I actually plopped on here, eyes wide, is pretty impressive in terms of the technology, in terms of the pushing that all parties, the public, staff, the commission, has forced the industry to achieve, and a willingness by the industry to do the very best. So with all those comments, I could certainly support all the findings that are outlined by staff. And I guess I did have that question about the retirement of the buyer system 6 months from the date that the charcoal filters are in place. And I don't know if anyone has any different feelings about that, or if we're comfortable with that.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Braggley. Commissioner Blau.
Yeah, thank you. First, I just want to comment on the retention basin. Having built a lot of them, you need to understand that if the retention basin overflows, it's kind of like, so what? Without the retention basin, the water flow is just going to go however fast it wants to. With the retention basin, what you're doing is you're capturing the water and slowing it down by metering it out at a lower rate. So to think that the overflow in the retention basin could somehow damage the creek, just the opposite's true. having it there is going to give you lots of protection. Again, if you have a rainstorm that's so horrific that it overwhelms the basin, like I say, without the basin being there, it would be even worse. In regard to the virus system, I was happy to hear Mr. Edie tell me that it's far more efficient and less costly to run that system than the virus system. So I have no doubt that they're going to make every effort to get the carbon filtration system up and running and working properly, to be able to do away with the virus system. Having said all that, when we first started developing the cannabis ordinance, I took the position, and it was my recommendation to the board, that this be the only kind of a grow that be allowed anywhere other than, far out the Ag 2 zone. That it needed to be in a greenhouse. There needed to be no odor migrate outside of the greenhouse, outside the grow. So I'm happy to see the industry move in that direction, that the technology is there, although I think the carbon filtration system was there when we started. The other thing that I'm going to bring up is, and I brought this up again when this thing started, with the odor issues, has the county bought the Nasal Ranger yet? They make this gun. It's about a $1,500 device, and you can go out to this particular operation, stand outside, point the gun at it, and tell whether there's odor coming off of it or not. You could also go around the greenhouse and point it at other grows or other greenhouses to determine that the odor is coming from them. So I mean, I don't get why we don't buy the Nasal Ranger. They're not that expensive, and it would eliminate the problem of having to be subjective as to where the odor comes as being more objective. So based on all that, I'm also prepared to support the project.
Thank you, Commissioner Blau. So Commissioner Cooney, I think, was that did you make the motion yet, or?
Muted, Mike.
I had reserved making the motion until I heard from my fellow commissioners, but nothing I've heard sways me from my initial thoughts that this project should be approved at this time. The process is what it is. There could be an appeal, there could be delayed implementation, but in the end, I think the volume and number of public comments indicates that this project should move forward, and we're all hopeful to a satisfactory outcome. So given that, I am going to follow staff's recommendation, which is set forth in our most recent staff memorandum dated September, that is August 24. And it's on, well, pages aren't numbered, but it's in that as follows. The staff recommends the revised findings for approval of the project, and based on the environmental review being adequate as item number 2, and approving the project subject to the revised conditions which are set forth in the various documents. That's my motion.
Thank you, Commissioner Cooney.
I'll second it.
Okay, moved and seconded. Any discussion? Okay, Mr. Villalobos.
Commissioner Cooney,
Aye.
Commissioner Bridley,
Aye.
Commissioner Park,
Aye.
Commissioner Blau,
Aye.
Chair Farini.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
Okay, Secretary Wilson.
I'm Chair, sorry, I might be jumping the gun. I just wanted to just wrap up on our earlier conversation that if the chair would like to open up public comment briefly for, I think it's Miss Maureen McCaffrey for public comment on the director's report before we conclude today.
Certainly. Director Plowman, are you available?
Director Plowman may be in another engagement, but we can still open up public comment just to take testimony from Marie McCaffrey and then close it and adjourn.
Okay, so we will reopen public comment and go to Ms. Clafferty.
Hi, it's Maureen Claffey. Maureen Claffey, thank you. I'm here again representing Save the Arroyo Paradon Watershed grassroots group, responding to Ms. Plowman's comments regarding Adam Brand's project, which also abuts Arroyo Paradon Creek, and the development of another backroom deal between the growers and another grassroots group, the Coalition, that seems laser focused on only smell issues and does not represent the other grassroots groups and activists working in the area. Just for the record, I have not seen the agreement. I was never privy to the agreement. I'm not a party to the agreement. And I really believe in the Washington Post tagline, which is "Democracy dies in darkness." I think Ms. Plowman's comment that everything in the agreement is non-enforceable by the county really speaks to the weakness and patheticness of that agreement, and really speaks to the point that the county is eschewing its main obligation with regard to cannabis, which is enforcement. None of us would be here today if there was a mechanism for enforcement. And I know some of you are saying, oh, these carbon things, what a revolution. We've never heard about it. I resent you the G&K appeal, which I led on June 5th, 2019. I resent you that material, G&K, June 5th, 2019, where Ms. Cosart Daly, the lawyer representing me again here today, and I both recommended carbon scrubbers over and above vapor phase systems. Again, June 5th, 2019. That's because other jurisdictions had already memorialized the idea that carbon scrubbers must be in cannabis greenhouses. That's in their cannabis ordinances. You can look up Santa Cruz County and see that. So this is not a new revolutionary idea. And the nasal ranger, also not a new idea, Mr. Blau. That was also in our testimony earlier in 2019. So I guess great minds think alike. We're all on the same page with carbon scrubbers and nasal rangers. I hope that the county can now do its job and actually enforce the laws that are on the book. That's all we ask. Smell should not be crossing property lines, period. That's not the neighbor's responsibility to deal with. It's not the grower's responsibility. The county needs to enforce its own laws. Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Park.
I actually have a question for Ms. Claffey. I'm referring to her earlier comments or beginning comments about the Autumn Brand's appeal. Ms. Claffey, did you or any group of which you are a member appeal the Autumn Brand's decision?
So with the appeal, you can only one person can submit an appeal, right? So the coalition for Concerned Cannabis submitted an appeal, and then they withdrew their appeal. And actually, there's a big question mark right now about I cannot. And if any of you know what the protocol is for a withdrawn appeal, I looked up the county code for appeals that are withdrawn. I've spoken with someone who's a 30-year veteran of the Board of Supervisors. Nobody seems to know what happens with a withdrawn appeal. So many members of our various grassroots groups spoke against Autumn Brand's project as concerned citizens. were they represented in that withdrawn appeal? It's a question mark because like I'm on the coalition's newsletter, but I wasn't privy to the negotiations with Mark Chitillo and the growers and the county supervisors.
Okay,
So
thank
in
you,
my
Ms.
mind,
Claffey.
yeah.
Hang on just a sec, okay? Mr. Wilson has a comment he needs to make.
Chair, commissioners, my recommendation is that we open up public comment to give a request for public comment. We aren't agendized for any further discussion on any items that aren't on the agenda. So if the commission wants to pursue any conversation, discussion on this, I recommend it be agendized. So just that's my recommendation on any further comments.
So, Mr. Wilson, if this had come up in public comment earlier, that would be another format where a member of the public, like Ms. Claffey, could make her points on that.
Mr. Chair, thank you. Earlier when we made, we opened it up for items that public comment on items that aren't on the agenda.
Right.
And just for the commission, and you guys are more familiar with this than I am, is of course is these conversations do need to be agendized when we start going into the details of specific items. And when we start asking about projects that aren't on the agenda or items that aren't specific on the agenda, I do caution that we do need to agendize and notice them appropriately before we have lengthy conversations on specific items.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Wilson. Commissioner Cooney?
No, sorry, leftover.
Yes, sir. Commissioner Blau?
Yeah, I just want to point out to Maureen that she is wrong. I believe that you can also file an appeal. We have had occasions where more than one entity files an appeal. That in fact, we've seen some recently where there's 3, 4. So if whoever told you you can't file an appeal, I think was wrong. And I think Mr. Wilson can verify that for you, or Mr. Pettit will verify it for you. And I'm not talking about a particular project, I'm talking about the process.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Blau. Okay, well, with that, I think we're done with today's hearing. And we'll see y'all next time.
Thank you.